And welcome to another exciting episode of The Energy That Surrounds Us. I'm your host, Michael, and I will also be your guest tonight. So, my scheduled guest had a last minute emergency come up and was unable to make it. So, while I was looking to see about getting a replacement guest, I thought about what a lot of the fans have been asking for in knowing what happened on my road trip and what I have coming up. So I thought, why not take this universal opportunity and have an episode devoted to just that? So for the next hour to hour and a half, I will be entertaining you with the story of what I experienced while on the road and also with what is upcoming for the shows and for me, and what exciting adventures await. So, without further ado, let's dive into it. So, many of you know who have been following along that April and the first week of May, I was on the road. And so, most of my shows were done on the road, which allowed me to air episodes from different locations such as Laurel, Mississippi to, let's see, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, I believe I did one. Or actually, no, not Tuscaloosa. Where was I in? I believe I did one in Alabama. And I did some in various cities of Texas, in Tombstone, Arizona. And so that was a challenge to work out logistically with the guests, and also a challenge to find the internet so that I could do the episodes. So, with that being said, I am going to start with what happened on the road trip. So, I picked up Rob in Tuscaloosa, and Captain Rob and I came the next day back to Texas, and we went to Gibbsland, Louisiana, which some of you may be familiar with and some of you may not be. And for those who are not familiar, that is the site of the museum to the ambush site of Bonnie and Clyde. Now, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow were gunned down on the road by a Texas Ranger and a posse. Now, there is a monument to the actual site where Bonnie and Clyde were shot and killed. And in the museum, you can see a couple of the cars, a lot of information around what happened, who Bonnie and Clyde were, and a few other gangsters, what movies have been made, what stories have been told. So if you get a chance, I highly recommend visiting the Ambush Museum. There have been recently some storms that went through there, and I believe tornado as well. So you might want to call and check the website before going. Excuse me. But again, do recommend checking out the Ambush Museum. So after we checked out the museum, we came back to Texas and we went to see where Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker were buried. Now, they are buried in two different locations, and there's an interesting story to that I will get into in just a moment. But one of the things that's interesting to note as well is Bonnie Parker is buried next to her mom, and they are in a very nice cemetery in Dallas. And on the other side of town, closer to downtown Dallas, Clyde Barrow is buried with his family in a much smaller, more intimate cemetery, which, if you didn't know it was there, you probably might have passed it several times and not realized it. Now, legend goes that the family and Bonnie wanted to be buried with Clyde, but the mother wouldn't have it. So the mother and Bonnie were buried together. Bonnie's not happy about it. And so, one thing that I noticed while at visiting the cemetery, Bonnie's gravesite has no grass in front of it, just dirt. Now, you could say, well, that's because people walk on it and everything, but there was only one other grave site that I've seen like this, and it's not a popular person. And Bonnie Parker's mom had grass mostly covering it. So I tend to be of the theory that her anger is not allowing the grass to grow. And so I heard that supposedly in June they are going to exhume Bonnie Parker. The family is going to get their wish, and she is going to be moved and relocated next to Clyde and his family so they will be able to be buried together. Now, if that's going to happen, I don't know. Story goes the cemetery is not wanting to exhume her grave, which leads conspiracy theorists to a couple reasons why. One of the reason I've heard is she's not buried there. Her grave got moved a while ago and they didn't mark it. Another theory is there's nothing there to dig up. The bones and everything have disintegrated because we have to think about in the 1920s, 1930s, they used different materials to bury the bodies in. So chances are they're not going to be able to dig her up because of the conditions the body is going to be in. So what's going to happen? We'll have to all wait and see. And after we did this, we went for a quick trip down to San Antonio where we toured the Alamo and stayed at the Crockett Hotel, which was one of the most haunted hotels in San Antonio, we found out before we got there. Now, there's a story to the Crockett of a maid who is haunting the elevators. And so, if you get to see her, don't be alarmed. She means you no harm. But the story goes she was finishing her shift, got in the elevator, the rope or cable snapped, and it plummeted down, and she lost her life in that accident. And so that is a tragedy and very sad. And while we were there, Captain Rob said that a couple or a small family were screaming because they were in the elevator with a cleaning lady. And when they went to get off the elevator in the lobby, there was no cleaning lady. So, did they meet the spirit of the Crockett Hotel? Could be. And if you have been to the Crockett Hotel and you've experienced her, let me know in the comments. I'm, interested to see, how many people have experienced this spirit. And while I was not present for this experience, I was off on another adventure. Now, this adventure was my opportunity to meet with and investigate with the Wraith. He is down in San Antonio area, and I met him at a Paracon and missed an opportunity to investigate with him. So he was talking to me about this forest that he has been investigating for a while. So I took advantage of being in San Antonio and connecting with him. And so the story goes as I can remember it. I met him and then followed him to the Donkey Lady Bridge, which is supposed to be haunted in its own right. We cross the bridge and we go into this forest. So the forest has no real lighting in it like you would expect, because they don't really expect, I think, a lot of people to be walking in the pitch night of the wee hours of the morning, so to speak, through here. And so we were walking, and I hit this one spot, and Wraith was asking me what's going on, and I was like, I can feel energy coming from me from both sides. Like I was in the middle of a portal, so to speak, connection. And so the energy was really strange. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this lady in white rush by. And I tell him, did you see the lady in white? Who was in the forest? And he informed me that he didn't see her, but a few people have seen her and they view her as the guardian of the forest, which he thought was really cool that I saw her. And I agree. I, thought that was really cool. And at that same time, I started to hear what sounded like, I almost want to say, monkeys jumping from tree to tree in to my right. And it would be as if they were jumping along where we were walking. And so they were keeping up with us, and there were no monkeys there. They were spirits moving through the trees. And I got the feeling of going and investigating further into the forest at this point. And I'm sure many of you have gotten that feeling where you just feel drawn to go in. So I go into the forest at this point, and I get this feeling the more I go in, the more things are around me, and I'm being surrounded by these energies, but I'm not feeling like I'm at risk or, they mean me any harm. So I respect them. They respected me. And we actually find the back of a old 1980s large TV. Like, I say large, not the big screens, but the normal size, which we thought was kind of strange and why that would be in the forest. And come to find out, Lurker, who was with me, asked Wraith what was going on, if he had known that was there, and he said yes. So we were like, okay, so we left it, and we went back to the entrance area to the forest and took a different path. Now, this path is where the adventure takes a very strange twist that I have a hard time explaining. You really have to experience it, but I will do my best. So we go and we take this path and we turn left and we end up at this river that the bridge is over. And so this is the border of the forest to the city, so to speak. So we're like, okay. And we notice that there's some buildings off to the on the other side of the trees. And there's a longer path that goes to the right. And so we were like, hey, we haven't been here very long. Let's see what's going on. So he goes, I want to show you a really special spot. So we go up this path, and I noticed to the right, it seems like the trees are making like little gateways, little portal areas. And I find that a little strange, and there's not many trees knocked down. So either they do a really good job of maintaining this forest area, or a lot of the trees just don't get knocked down there, which is strange because they are in big storm area of Texas. Well, to my surprise, we go through this little section off the beaten path, and we're sitting on these little tree stumps and tree debris area. It kind of made like a chair. When Wraith looks at me, he smiles and he says, okay, find your way back to the path. Do you think you could do it? And I was like, sure. We hadn't walked that far. I start walking towards what I believe is where we came in. And next thing I know, I am halfway back to where I started walking from, where the chair is. And realize, wait a minute, how did I didn't turn. How am I going backwards and making a circle? So he was kind of surprised that I figured that out as quick as I did before getting there. So I turned around and started walking a bit, and it felt like what took us 5 minutes to walk to was taking us like 15 minutes to walk out of. And there's this white mist in the area that wasn't there before. And we get to where I'm starting to think, okay, this is the entrance where we came out of and where we entered. So I work my way towards it. And sure enough, I see the path and get on the path. And we're all surprised that we came out where we actually went in. Usually he says he and Lurker come up further up the path. So it was kind of special to me to be like, wow, not only did I figure out sooner I was walking in a circle, but I also found the exact entrance to go out of in this mist. And the reason I point out that I got turned around and that surprised me is people who know me know I have a really good sense of direction. Like, you could drop me in the middle of a forest and I can find my way out. I rarely get lost. So this was really interesting for me to be turned around and not realizing that I turned around. And little did I know that was just the beginning of what this forest had in store for me. So we're talking, Wraith, Lurker, and I, and we're walking up, and he says, look to your left. And I said, yeah, there's a little pathway through where you can walk straight to the what we found out was a drop off where there's a river creek back there. Well, he says, watch this. And I'm like, okay. He clicks his flashlight on. There's branches blocking the pathway. There is no visible path. You turn the light off, all of a sudden you can see the path. Now, I agree, Joanne, it is an amazing place. And I'm going to take a moment real quick to say hey to Derek. My family is doing great. Thank you for asking. And good morning to, I hope I'm going to pronounce this right, Manong in the Philippines. Thank you for watching. And so now let's get back to the adventure at hand. The amazing thing of this forest. We walk a little bit further up, and I see a spot to the left. So I start walking through, and I start to notice as I'm lining up where I can see to where I feel like I could go through to this field, that in the field is a hut kind of building that's kind of got a bluish haze to it, like it's there but it's not there. It's like the moon is lighting it up but it's not lighting it up. I think the closest way I could describe it would be at the end of Return of the Jedi, Star Wars movie, where you see the Jedi who Luke grew up with that had passed and they're there in spirit form. That's what this all looked like. And I'm seeing these natives walking about, going about their day. And I'm thinking, how am I seeing them, but they're not seeing me? And there's a lot of space down there where I found out there wasn't a lot of space. And the path that I walked through was one of these paths to where when you shine the light on, there's trees blocking and branches blocking the walkway. And I can tell you, when I walked through, nothing touched my leg. I was in shorts. I'm pretty sure I was in shorts or jeans, but still, I would have felt branches and I would have heard, stepping on branches, and it was quiet. It was like there was nothing there. And so I walked further up and we found another spot. And this time I said to Wraith, I'm going to go on the other side of this and I'm going to see how far I can go. But when I come back, shine your light and see if the branches will appear while I'm on the other side of it. And not only that, but will I appear or will I disappear? Because we can't explain what's going on. It's like we're seeing two different dimensions occupying the same space in this forest. So I get beyond the point and I turn and I say, okay, turn your light on. And sure enough, the branches show up and I can still see them and they can see me. But when I turn to walk and go further back, I get caught up in all these thorns and I get scratches on my legs from the thorns, which kind of surprised me because wearing jeans, thorns don't usually go through jeans that deep to leave scratch marks, and these scratch marks were itchy too. So we took it as a sign that I was not supposed to go beyond this point, not yet at least. Well, we start walking up, and I can feel there's a strange energy that's watching us, and I can hear something and see something moving along in the forest ahead of us. And we start to make this turn, and there's this dark area that looks like it's a canopy over a tunnel entrance that goes down like towards a cave or an underground tunnel. And I was like, there's a bunch of Wendigos there. And I could feel a Wendigo was watching us from the trees that followed us from an area that we had passed where both Wraith and I were like, there's a bunch of Wendigos over there. let's leave them alone. So we get around the corner and we go to this little spot where there's now fenced in the remains of a house where natives lived while they were in the forest. And on the way back, it was either on the way back or on the way towards the house, but on this little stretch, I had looked up because I was constantly looking at the sky because I kind of had that Viking sense, the Norse of following the stars and figuring out where I'm at. And the moon was in a slightly different place, but I was like, well, time is moving, so the moon could be in a new spot, so I was okay with that. But here's the thing. Okay, so here's the moon. Over here is Orion with his belt. Over here is Orion and his belt, occupying the same sky at the same time. And astronomically, that is impossible. You cannot have stars mirroring stars in the same space. It doesn't happen. That's not what happens here. So I'm talking with Wraith about it, and he's like, yeah, everything is mirrored here. Emotions, like we were feeling more tired than we really were, and time was moving differently in this forest area than the previous area. And Wraith has been there enough that he has noted each section of the forest, when you get to certain points, the energy shifts to a new zone, so to speak. So we went through 2 zones that night, and on the way back, what looks like a curve that's going like this for the path, as we're walking towards it, it starts to light up so that we could see the concrete in front of us because it was pitch black, even though the moon was out. And the S that was like this all of a sudden became a normal curve. So we actually physically saw the concrete move and the walkway form a different path in front of us, which I gotta say, that was something I was not prepared to see because concrete doesn't move. And little did I know, there was a little bit more of a surprise coming as we were noticing, and I pointed out a couple of times where a shadow is standing in a certain spot, rushed over. When we got there, what we saw as a shadow of a bean or something all of a sudden was a trash can sitting there. And so Wraith and I were like, there's shapeshifters here because we definitely know we saw something and it wasn't a trash can moving. Trash cans don't move unless there's wind, in which case you would hear them moving. These were solid, locked down. They couldn't move if they wanted to. So that was really interesting. And when we got to the bridge, there was one thing that I noticed that was different from when we entered, and that was so when we first got to the bridge before the adventure started, you could not see any water. It was pitch black. All you could see was the bridge in front of you with the car lights and flashlights. Well, then on the way out, we notice on the right side as you're walking towards San Antonio, you could see the babbling brook and the creek and running water. You could see all of it. So underneath the bridge it goes, and to the other side you could see water. Now here's One thing about this bridge I cannot explain. Water is moving so fast, you can see it, you can hear it on one side, gets under the bridge, and is still as glass on the other side of the bridge. I don't know of many things underneath the bridge that can stop running water from running, let alone maintain the level. So that is another experience of the forest I cannot explain. And with that, we bade each other a good night and decided we needed to call it a night. And little did I know, I started this adventure at say 11:15 at night. It was almost 3 in the morning when we left. And none of us could explain how the time disappeared and sped up so fast because we did not feel like we were in the forest that long. So that's another aspect of this forest that is very interesting. And so I'm looking forward to going back to San Antonio and experiencing some more of this because this is just so much phenomena that you cannot explain, that just once you experience it, you get drawn to trying to understand what you experienced. So the next day we went to Lockhart and we got some barbecue. And so I recently found out there is some haunted stuff down in Lockhart. So I'm looking forward to returning to Lockhart to experience this. And I am so grateful to my friend in Lockhart for putting this on my radar. And I will wait to share more about that until we get it scheduled and logistics and everything figured out. Now, when we got back to Dallas, we then went up to Oklahoma City where I got to meet API of Oklahoma. This is Afterlife Paranormal Investigators of Oklahoma. And it's my friend Tammy who has been on the show. Her group, Tammy Radin, and Brooke and Jill, and I was so grateful to meet them. We were able to do a mini investigation where we had the spirit of a child, I believe, there with us, and we were experiencing a portal in the office area that we were in. And the thing that amazed me was we would be in the back room, and the front room was where we had a music box with a motion detector on it was going off and answering questions for us. But that wasn't really the truly exciting thing. I mean, that was amazing to see. I've never seen that before. But what drew my attention was we had put two cat balls on the sofa, and one rolled in between the pillow and the back cushion and the bottom cushion that you sit on. And the other one was sitting there on the edge, and all of a sudden it lights up, rolls, and before it makes contact with the other cat ball, that cat ball starts to light up. And so I'm sitting here wondering, how does a cat ball that's wedged between three objects, keeping it from moving, light up and move? Something had to touch that. So that was a truly, you know, one of those moments where you start to believe there is spirits and other things around, because if the cat ball had hit it, I would understand the cat ball set it off. but the cat ball hadn't touched it yet. They actually were going off at the same time while the other one was in motion. So that was really cool to see. And Tammy used a device that kind of, I want to say, mimicked like Tibetan sound bowls. And I thought that was a really cool way to raise energy vibration in the area. And so we had a short night and it was more of a meet and greet kind of deal. And I was so grateful for them for that opportunity. And the next day we went to Muskogee to a barbecue with Kyle and got to experience actually a lot of interesting chilies and barbecues. And being from Texas, we know barbecue. There was some really good barbecues there and some really interesting chilies. And Kyle and I were laughing at one of the chilies. Unfortunately, didn't quite make it. It was more of a soup than a chili. So we were like, does it really count? Can we really vote for that? Because this was a competition and it was kind of interesting being in the seat of trying everything and judging whose was better than others. And we actually got to try a smoked gator, and they said they smoked it because if they went to grill it or barbecue it, it would dry it out too much and it wouldn't work. And so the meat was a little on the tougher side. But for being gator and being like on the back of its leg kind of meat, I gotta say though, the gator tasted really good. And so I was impressed by the gator. And there was some spicy food there. I tried to avoid as much as possible because I'm not too much of a fan of the spicy foods. But all in all, that was a fun experience. And then we got to go back to Dallas, where we then headed off to stay the night in, I believe it's called Artesia, New Mexico, which was a nice little scenic area. And then the next day we were in Tombstone, where we got to walk around and we got to experience the town at night alone. There was one little ghost tour going on, but they kind of stayed in their area. We were in ours, and we were getting a lot of information on an app that we were running. And we went to check out this bridge that had a lot of interesting energy to it, and a lot of people were actually investigating this bridge and kind of surprised me. It was near a monument, and what kind of surprised me is the way this bridge was lined up. The road goes next to it, but as cars are coming to go by you, it looks like they're literally going to come onto the bridge. And so I actually had a brief moment where I panicked and was standing there going, I'm about to get run over by a car because there's nowhere to go. And then realized the car can't come where I am, and it went by. But it was kind of cool to have that experience because it really helps to put things in perspective of what it would be like back then when it was in use and what people might have been doing and how accidents could have happened there. And so that was a lot of fun. And I met Pamela and her husband, Jeff, there. And we met Bruce Bennett, who was on Paranormal Versus there. And I will work on seeing if I can get him to come on this show as well. The Wi-Fi in Tombstone is very iffy. It is out in the desert, so that's why I was amazed I could do 2 shows there I pre-recorded one show and did a live show, and was so grateful to the hotel that the internet held long enough to do the shows. And then the next night, we went to Tucson. Well, during the day, we went to Old Tucson, which we found out the movie studio was closed for remodeling. That day, they were doing some work on it. And the next day would be when you could go live and walking around. And so we appreciated the fact we were there and we got to see it. And then we went that night. I went, met with Jeff and Pam, and was looking at these lights. Now, we call them alien lights because they do not rise from the ground. They don't descend from the sky. They just appear. They're not a plane because it's not a cloud. It wasn't cloudy, and then all of a sudden they were clear of the clouds, and so you've seen them. They would literally just appear out of thin air, light up, and then move a little bit and then disappear. And they could get brighter, dimmer. And we were noticing they were responding to us. Well, I actually had an incident with my car where a part of my car was malfunctioning, so I had to leave to get that fixed. And thankfully got it fixed and came back, and we did some more investigating where we were watching these lights, and you could see the lights of the town area lighting up the trees and the ground level, but above it you could see lights, and then you would see them disappear behind the mountains in the background. And so it was really cool to see and experience these lights literally coming out of nowhere and reacting to being seen through IR cameras or night vision, or you could even see them with the naked eye. And so I can't say that they were UFOs because they look to be just lights, and they could have been UFOs, but we didn't see them approach. And so it's hard to say, what really they are. So that's why I'm with Jeff and we just call them alien lights. And it's amazing looking at these and just, you can't help but sit there and be like, what is going on in front of my eyes? I am being privileged to a light show that so many people around here are missing. And we were actually in the top level of a parking garage of a hospital. So it's well lit. So we couldn't say it's because we were in a dark spot. No, we were in a well lit area watching these lights. And so thank you to Pam and Jeff for that experience. And when we left the next day from Tucson, we went to Kanab, Utah, where I got to meet with Captain Rob, a dear friend of mine who's been on this show, who's been on Paranormal Versus, and Riding Through the Unknown, and that was Medell Niff. And we went to experience contacting star beings or other dimensional beings, other worldly beings at this reservoir, and all of a sudden it just starts downpouring. And we're like, maybe, we should head back. Something just seemed strange because the rain just came kind of out of nowhere, and it actually started to snow too a little bit. And we're like, this is really weird. Well, then we see a car drive into the boat ramp area of the reservoir, and it looks like its front tires are actually at water level or maybe slightly in the water. And we were trying to figure out what's going on. Medell and I started getting a bad feeling. We were getting warnings on our devices, so we decided to call it. We left, got to the hotel. The rain and snow was kind of mixing, still falling, but it was getting a little bit better. And we're just out there talking and decided to call it a night. Well, next morning, I get up and I was the only one awake at the time and decided Medell's up. We're going to go try again. So we go over to the reservoir. No sign of the vehicle. Don't know what happened to the vehicle. We trust that it got home okay. We're looking up and it's very cloudy. And we notice the water of the reservoir has 4 areas that are acting differently, where you have still water, you have water moving in a circular pattern, the waves, you have an area where the waves are going back and forth, and then another area where the waves are kind of just going however they want to go. It's kind of hard to explain. But we're also noticing there's some distinct little interesting patterns in the dirt under the water. And at one point, we see a stick that's on top of the dirt underwater that is at a perfect 45-degree angle. And you can see the tip of the stick on the sand, so it's not sticking in the dirt, and the water moving over this stick, and the stick is staying perfectly still. So we were like, can't explain that. Don't know why that's doing that, but that is really interesting. And sorry, we look up and we start to notice the clouds are acting a little different. Where we saw them in the background, they were starting to dissipate and the sun was starting to appear, but yet it was still heavily overcast. So we were just looking and decided, okay, let's start taking photographs. In our photographs, I'll have to find some of mine that are really noticeable, because you got to zoom in and really know what you're looking for. But some of them actually looked like there were what we could describe as maybe shadow beings being maybe not fully formed with the sun behind them. They couldn't fully show who they were, what star they were from, but they would be on top of the clouds. And so we would see them standing there, and we were like, wow, this is really cool. Who would have thought this? Because when you look at the picture by itself, you're just like, it's a picture of a cloud with the sunbeam behind it, nothing big. But you had to zoom in to find what was going on. And so she and I were having a lot of fun with that, and then decided to go back to the hotel, get some breakfast, and part ways. She went home. We then started our journey back to Texas, which took a couple of days to do. And On the way back, we got into a hailstorm for a brief few minutes. Not that bad. Got into a snowstorm, which made traffic move very slowly and was you couldn't see as far as normally you could, so that interfered with traffic as well. So and rain, and so all kinds of weather issues going on. Well, we finally get into Texas and we're heading back, and I get an alert on my phone about tornadoes coming up, and I'm talking on the phone with my mom, letting her know we're coming back, and we're on the home run stretch back to Dallas, and lo and behold, we hit Bowie, and to the left of me, I can see off in the distance, close enough that I could make out what it was, but not close enough that it was impacting the car. I could see a tornado to my left. Well, Captain Rob shows me in a picture later a tornado forming to the right of us. So actually drove smack dab through two tornadoes. On the way home, we get home safely and take a day to rest, and then head out to south to meet Corey and her husband Matt down in Seadrift. So that was fun because we got to see the spot where the camels the U.S. military brought into Texas for use in the military. We got to see where they landed in Indianola, and that was cool to see that marker because I had just seen that on doing a video for the history of Texas, and we got to go to La Bahia in Goliad and actually walk inside this time La Bahia. So it was my second time there, but first time to go inside, and it was so interesting to see the grounds, the chapel, the fortifications, and feel the energy inside, knowing this was the spot where a massacre happened on Easter in Texas that is vastly getting forgotten, and I feel like needs to be remembered because it's a huge part of Texas history, and that's the Goliad Massacre. And that's why the battle cry of Texas is remember the Alamo, remember Goliad, because both were scenes of where you could say the armies were just massacred. They were overwhelmed and just wiped out. Well, after spending some time and having a really cool seafood boil with Corey and Matt, and doing a little bit of fishing here and there and exploring, we then spent the night and the next day went out to Alabama, and we got to see the battleship Alabama and a bunch of uh, planes and a submarine, and it was a really nice military park and was worth seeing. And we then went into Florida, and while in Florida we visited with some of his friends and family, and we also got to go to see Savannah, Georgia, which I had never been to, and also got to see different areas of Florida that I had never seen. And we paid a visit to St. Augustine again and got to walk around a little bit there. So that was fun. And then on the way back is when I stopped and spent the night in Laurel, Mississippi, which Side note to the paranormal, Laurel is where they film Hometown on Home and Garden TV, HGTV, and Ben and Aaron are really big there, and I enjoy watching the show, I admit, because they're rehabbing the town and they do a lot for the town. And so that was really cool to me to be able to see that. And they were actually there filming, they said that day when I went and talked to the people at Ben's workshop, which he wasn't at, but it was exactly like the show shows. And they all said they get to watch when they're filming, and they're really nice people, they were saying. And so I didn't get a chance to meet them, but still, it was a really cool experience. And if you ever get the chance to go to Laurel, Mississippi, I highly recommend it. It is a really cool small town. And then I ended the trip back in Texas and wrapped it up. So, with that being said, now I'm going to share what's upcoming for me and the shows, and that is so in June we have a really interesting lineup of guests that I think you all will enjoy. Dana Luis is going to be on next week, and she was on Paranormal Versus, and so I feel like we didn't really get to a lot because a lot of the guests have a lot of experiences that they have. So I'm bringing her on to expand upon and share more experiences, I'm hoping, and get deeper into them as well, because it's hard to get into a lot of it and cover a lot in an hour. So we do the best we can, and that's why sometimes I'll repeat guests and share guests from other shows that I'm on to try and get more of the experiences for you guys. And then I have an amazing guest following week of Jamie Lee Mayfield, and she has some really cool experiences, and I would like to share more about her episode and what we'll be talking about, but that one I'm going to hold off on until we get closer to, because there is a really unique thing to this guest that I'm wanting to hold off on. And then I have another new guest the last Tuesday of June, and that is Shelley Burke Robertson. And so that will be a lot of fun. A fun episode. I've been looking forward to each of these episodes. In July, I'm going to go ahead and carry us into July because I have some stuff going on in July that I want to share here as well. Opportunity that's coming up and share with you all. But the first Tuesday of July, I had the honor and privilege of meeting this duo team of ladies, and occasionally there's a gentleman that's with them. And I met them at the old Palestine jail during Parapalooza. This is when I was last there. And that would be, I'm sure many of you, especially if you're in Texas, have heard of them, the Texas Boo Crew. So looking forward to having these ladies on. They are so much fun to be around. I got to hang out with them at the History Haunts and Legends. And so that will be a fun episode for you all. Now, the second Tuesday of July, I had trouble with power issues and scheduling issues on their end. And so, finally, making up this episode, we are going to have on the Soul Sisters Supernatural. They were supposed to be on in February and tried again in March. So, fingers crossed, they're going to make it July 8th. So, super excited about that. July 15th, I'm doing a pre recorded episode because that week I am going to be at a conference where I'll be emceeing the conference on a small stage. So excited about that, and I will get into that in just a moment. But that guest is the original guest that was scheduled tonight, but had an emergency issue come up and tried to reschedule. And so she is rescheduled for that day. It's pre recorded, so that should air on its own. And that is Laura DeChamps. Now, that conference that I'm going to be at is the Full Disclosure Now conference, which, if you are going to be in St. Petersburg, Florida, I recommend you come and check it out. We are going to have a lot of many great speakers there, and we are going to have myself being there, and a lot of my guests, if you're a fan of Riding Through the Unknown, are going to be there. So it's a chance to meet them. And Woo Riders DG is going to be hanging out there as well. So it's a chance to meet some of all of you who enjoy watching my shows. And so excited about that. And I'm going to post here a link to the website. You can get more information, and tickets are still available. So if you're able to attend, that's really cool. It is July 15th to the 18th. So look forward to seeing you if you can make it. And if not, I will be back to normal shows after that's over when I get back. And on the 22nd of July, I have a team I have just started getting to know and watching on YouTube, and that is the Ethereal Enigma Paranormal Team. It's two ladies, and I think you all are going to really enjoy this team. I've been enjoying getting to know one of the team members and seeing what they're about, and so trust me, you all are in for a treat when that episode comes. And on the 29th of July is Melody Bruch. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Now, that is the next, as far as the schedule goes now, barring no emergencies. That is our schedule for this show and upcoming, where I am emceeing the Full Disclosure Movement.org conference. I will be on the solar stage, so I'll be emceeing the small stage, but I will be out and about in the crowd as well. Possibly might even get to talk to you if you're there, and we can record a small little snippet or interview, if you want to call it that, where get to hear from you about what you think of the conference, the speakers, what they're sharing. So excited for that opportunity and looking forward to meeting um, a lot of my guests from my other show, Riding Through the Unknown. So, with that, I thank you all for tuning in tonight and hearing about my adventure on the road and what's coming up. And so, with that, I'm going to bid you all adieu because it is about to break open with a huge storm. So I don't want the internet to get messed with and the show just suddenly drop, because that has happened in storms. So I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode. Have a wonderful night and blessings to you all. And see you next time. Good night, everyone.